Hello everybody and welcome back. So we're gonna start shading the ground now, and what I'm going to do to speed this process is export the RBD outer and center as an AS file and then read it back in, so that way we don't have to export it every time. I'm not going to include the ground and the mountains because we're going to focus on this primarily. So let's copy this and let's create an Arnold node and force object RBD outer and core, and I'm going to export this as TMP core or RBD, and I only need shapes. I don't need the shaders, and that's it. If we hit render, it's gonna cook the points. And it's exporting. Done. Let's go to the object context, create an Arnold node or Arnold procedural, and call this RBD procedural. And for the shader, I'm gonna create a new one. I'm gonna copy the RBD preview, call this RBD ground shading. And let's copy this. Now if we go to the look dev node and only include this, hit render, we should see the ground rendering super quick. Maybe something happened. The file is quite big, so it could be that it's taken some time, but I didn't expect it to take this long. It should be fairly quick. So let me wait for this. I'll double check a few things and then see what's going on. So the main issue was in the export, I turned on export shader assignment, and that was causing issue when I read the S file back in. So I turned it off and re-exported again, and now it's working perfectly. So it's still super bright, and what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna use these two textures that I picked from Megascan. And honestly, you can pick anything. It's called, one is for moss, rock, and this is the reference if you wanna find the exact same one, and this is just a cliff texture or a rock rough. And I'm gonna use these to and project them onto the surface. So to do this properly, we need one attribute, which is the rest attribute. And the easiest way to do this is when we go, before we transform the data, we create a rest node. So this is my geometry, this is my transform points, and then everything goes through this node, and then it gets passed on to the render. All we have to do is plug in a rest, and that will give us the rest attribute. Now if we go to the RBD ground shading, and let me copy the path for the textures. So the first one is create an image file, and to be able to use the rest attribute for texturing, we have to use the triplanar node. So I'm gonna use this as the input, and I'm gonna plug this in directly. I'm gonna hit render, and it doesn't have a texture, so I'm gonna paste this. And let's set a few things. So for the pref, I'm gonna for the chord space, I'm gonna change it to pref, and the name of the attribute is rest. And right now that texture is super small, so I'm gonna lower the scale to make it bigger. and the refreshing is not amazing here. That it's still buggy in Houdini 18 at the moment, but they will fix it very soon. So let me check the scale. Yeah, 0.1 should be good. And this is for the rock. Okay. And I'm gonna copy these two, and I'm also going to read the other texture. I'm gonna make it bigger, 0.05, 0.05, and 0.05. And right now you can see it has a tiling issue. So to fix that, or to mitigate some of that, we're gonna turn on the cell feature, and we'll stamp copies of the texture, rotate them, and then blend them together. Okay, so let's use cell feature. And let's hit render again. And my idea is to use one texture for the outside and one texture for the inside. And I'm gonna go with this one for the top. I'm gonna color it a bit so it has a beige tint rather than black and white, or this. And I will give it some saturation so it's not it has more contrast. And with the tiling you can see it's working now. So let's do the same thing here. Cell, and we'll rotate it by 5, and then color correction. And I'm gonna add some saturation and multiply it by an orange tint. I'm gonna plug this into the diffuse. And let's connect this. We'll keep the specular, we'll keep everything. And let's hit render and see what we get. And if the texture is too dark, we'll just expose it here. So we'll play with the exposure and make sure that we get enough details. And I think I'm gonna delete the high-res RBD because it's taking a lot of time to render. Let's expose it by 0.5. And let's add some gamma. And I think the saturation is too much, so we'll use 1.1 here. And that's it. That's it for the main texture. I'm going to use this one, and then for the inside we're going to use this texture. Now, to be able to separate the two, we need some sort of attributes that we can use to read in the inside, or to separate the inside versus the outside. To make this fast, I'm going to work on the RBD outer only. Okay, and I'm going to show what I've done. So if I dive inside, I prepped a few attributes in the geometry. The first one is inside, so it's everything has an attribute inside equal to 0, and then only the inside faces will get a value of 1, and this is using the group on the geometry. So this is the original geo, and assigning 1 to the inside faces. I also wanted to separate the top and bottom. Remember, we have 2 layers. I wanted to be able to use different textures so we can see the layers. Maybe this is bright and this is darker, or whatever we decided we end up doing. So what I did is I created an attribute called group, and it's equal 0. And the top one, I'm going to set the group to be equal to 1. So I'm using the name. Remember, we named them group underscore A, group underscore B. So group underscore A will get a value of 1. And then group underscore B will get a value of 0. So these 2 attributes will allow me to separate the inside and top and bottom. And I'm going to read them in the shader and use them to create variations so everything is visible. And we'll continue setting this up in the next video. Thank you guys for watching, and see you in a bit.